Welcome to Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast. Learn firsthand from business owners who built successful ABA businesses. Utilize proven techniques and strategies to help your practice thrive. This is Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast with Jonathan Mueller.
Andy Mullins is the marketing director for the Shandy Clinic, a multidisciplinary pediatric therapy provider with 11 locations across Denver, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo. Andy has a storied marketing career in the autism services and healthcare field, working with large national ABA providers, with accrediting bodies, and even in direct primary care. Andy and I are dear friends going back to our time at Trumpet Behavioral Health. And I know Andy is a self-proclaimed Hoosier by birth and Boilermaker by the grace of God. So Andy, welcome to the pod, man.
So happy to be here, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, we've known each other for almost 10 years now, going back to 2013, which is kind of crazy. I think it just says like how old I'm getting, but I'm pumped to get your insights around marketing in our field and everything else. But the most important place that we can start is I want to tell me about your sister and her journey and how she inspired you to get into the autism services field.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to, Jonathan. So I was born and raised in rural Indiana, not terribly far outside of Chicago, but far enough that we were pretty secluded, a small town of about 2,000 people at the time. My sister, I have two older sisters. My middle sister was diagnosed with autism at about age 3. So at the time I was born, my parents had already, I think identified that something was up, but certainly where we lived and where we grew up, there weren't access to diagnostics, to resources. ABA was in its infancy at that point in time, right? And so, it just made for a really unique upbringing. My sister, she's high functioning. She today lives in a group home with about 5 other people and does really well and is pretty self-supported. But growing up, like she had a lot of challenging behaviors. Like there was, it was hard. I think it was really hard for both my parents who both worked and of course had 2 other kids and a million things going on. And so, it wasn't, I never thought that I would necessarily go into something related to autism in my career. It just so happens that I ended up in healthcare, and then that kind of morphed into the opportunity where we got connected at Trumpet Behavioral Health. So, I think, my sister's been an inspiration to me. She's a wonderful person. And as soon as I got into this industry, it was like, this is where I belong. This is where I want to be. So,
Andy, if there's one thing that you want like listeners to know about your sister, what would it be?
Oh man, that's a great question. That she's just like everybody else. She's got her quirks, but she's just like an amazing person. I think that would be it. She's awesome.
That's powerful, dude. And yes, like anyone else, right? We should not be defined by our disabilities. Well, kudos to you and your sister and her inspiration to you to be in this field. And I mean, you've built up so much experience over the years, as a leader in our field and as a marketing leader. Share just some of the most interesting projects that you've worked on and what you've learned from them.
Yeah. So, 12 years in the field, I've had the opportunity to literally wear every hat. And I think that's what makes my career experience really unique. There's probably a couple of things that stand out. When I was over the summer between my junior and senior year at Purdue, I had the opportunity to do an internship with a hospital in the Chicagoland area that specialized in interventional cardiology. Reporting to the CEO, which was kind of crazy to go from having no experience to working with a pretty high caliber person. And she was like, Andy, I want you to start a newsletter. I want everybody in this community to get a newsletter every quarter about our hospital from scratch, right? There was no foundation. It was like, okay, we'll do that. And that was really cool because it got me really steeped, really engaged with everybody at the hospital. I wrote every word, every letter that went in that newsletter. It was about 12 pages. We did it quarterly. And that really sparked in me kind of a deep interest in just writing and branding and messaging and how you communicate to a broad audience, but you do it in a way that's digestible. So that, fast forward a couple of years, that was a really cool experience. I got the opportunity to work for an organization called Paladina Health, which is now Everside Health, which is a primary care benefit that stacks on top of a traditional insurance plan, and doesn't cost anything to the employee. It's paid for by the employer, kind of like a gym membership per member per month. And I got to be really involved in building marketing automation for B2B2C. So like selling clients, employers on bringing on the benefit, then educating their eligible population about the benefit, getting them to sign up, and then getting them to schedule an appointment within 90 days so that we didn't have to pay back that fee. Just a really unique, complex, but really cool benefit. And, was involved with marketing automation, with brand development, with copywriting, advertising, you name it, right? So that was really cool. And then I think the third and kind of final thing was the work that I did at Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, which is an accrediting body specific for autism therapy providers, based in Los Angeles, California. Super cool organization. Really proud of the work we did there, primarily around messaging, brand building, and we were standing up a lot of marketing automation there too. So yeah, I think, like I said, wearing all the hats, but there's just a couple of things that have really brought me to where I am today, which is kind of this well-rounded marketing guy who can jump in and tackle things.
Help listeners understand sort of the difference between general brand building initiatives versus like lead generation campaigns and pay-per-click or social media or, the communication campaigns that you're describing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from a brand perspective, right, there's a couple of key elements to that. There's your messaging, which is like, what do you stand for and how do you reiterate that message in everything you do, both educating your employees and your team members to like what's on your website, what's on your social media. And then tangential to that, there's the visual element, right? Of like what colors, what logo, how is your brand communicated visually, which is very different from tactically like, we're going to stand up a campaign. Where's it going to go? Who are we targeting? What's the budget? What's right? What are we trying to achieve? It's interesting. Large organizations have people who specialize in all those things. But when it comes to our industry, that's like really hard, right? You got like, how do you find somebody who can do all of those things and ideally or hopefully do it well? And I have thoughts on that too, right? Just in terms of, do you bring in one person who tries to do it all well, or do you bring in a high level leader who can then outsource to different vendors? Or do you get somebody who's kind of new and you just set goals for them and let them kind of learn by the seat of their pants? There's a lot of different ways to go about it. But that's how I think of it, right? You've got brand and tactics. They go hand in hand, but they are separate things.
Yeah, I've heard one. So gut check me because you're the expert on this. But there's this idea of the 7 touch points. That is for consumer products. Whatever, soap, shampoo, it takes 7 touch points with that product for the consumer, for that product to even enter the consumer's consideration set, not to buy it, to enter the consideration set, which I think speaks to this level of detail that you describe around how you make sure you're in front of the right people at the right time. And some of that is just having your brand out there and these brand building campaigns. Maybe some are Google ads and other things. But am I getting the science of that 7 touch points right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I haven't read any recent research on this, but I would imagine that with how we're inundated with advertising and digital marketing today, that's probably even higher. But absolutely, I mean, the same principle applies to like remembering somebody's name, right? If you say it 7 times over and over, it sticks. And so, that's exactly right. You have to have repetition, especially from a messaging standpoint. I think if there's one thing I've learned over my career, it's like, figure out who you are and what you stand for and just hammer that message over and over, right? Like it's really important that you do not water down or muddy what it is you're trying to convey to your audience or audiences.
It's so true. And one of the things I've read recently is like the commodity that is in most demand is our attention. Like that's the hardest thing now. And because there's so many competing interests for our time, whether you're on the TikTok or Facebook or the Gram, whatever, LinkedIn, there's so much that competes for our time. It's really, it's that much harder now for brands to actually like garner someone's attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You think about, if you look at your Facebook feed or your LinkedIn feed, it's usually an ad as every 3 posts. I think Facebook is every 4. And so like you're scrolling through and seeing content, like for every 3 things you see from a friend, you're seeing a paid advertisement. I mean, and if you look through 500, if you look through your feed 10 times a day and you look at 50 things every time, that's 500. You've got 125, 150 advertisements you're seeing just there. That's not even the radio in the car, the TV you're watching at night. It's unbelievable.
You wonder why like there's this underlying angst that we have as a society now. It's because we're getting bombarded by all this stuff, which I guess means we've gotten really good at tuning it out too, right? Which again just like raises like the bar for a brand. But hey, one thing that you've been talking about earlier was this hiring happy hour that you did for Shandy recently.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a colleague and I, our director of ABA, were driving back from actually a lunch and learn in Pueblo with a group of pediatricians. And we were talking about this big void we have with our behavior technician roles, right? Like we've got all these open positions. We're testing all these different things to drive applications online, but we're not doing any, like, we don't feel like we're standing out, right? We're competing for the same pool of people. And I had this idea. It was like, what if we did something really fun and off the wall? And we came up with this concept that we called our hiring happy hour. And so the event was actually last night. It was in downtown Colorado Springs at this collective eatery, right? So one building that's got a bar and a bunch of different restaurants in it. And we basically stood up, we built a framework for it. We built the messaging. I did all the imagery and kind of graphics for it, and stood up an ad campaign to just create awareness in the community. Some at the university level, some just through Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn advertisements. And it was amazing. We weren't sure if it was going to work, but we're like, let's give it a shot. And we had a huge response from the community in terms of registrations. A little harder to get people to show up. We also had some wildfires happening here yesterday, so there were other environmental factors that impacted the attendance. But overall, we hit the hiring goal that we had set, and yeah, we're going to continue that as part of our recruiting strategy moving forward.
Dude, congratulations, because every single ABA provider, and Ascend, we face this too, like there is a dearth of behavior technicians and RBTs. But so I like how you talked about the messaging here. There's this notion in marketing about a call to action. Can you just explain kind of what a call to action is? And for example, for this event, like what was your call to action?
Yeah, great question. So a call to action, commonly referred to as the CTA, is exactly that. It's an action you want the end user to take. And you see this all the time on even like your Facebook feed. Sign up, learn more, get started, download now, right? Those are all calls to action. And so, from an advertising perspective, our CTA, our call to action here, was sign up, right? For this free event, come have some food, hang out with our team, learn more about the behavior tech role. Once we got people signed up, we had this kind of growing master list of registrants. The second thing we did is that I stood up a 4-part email automation campaign. So as soon as those people were registered, we moved them into a series of emails. They got one a week, building up to the event, that broke down what the behavior technician role and really day in the life of behavior technician looks like, right? So we were trying to get people prepped for or build a baseline understanding of like what this role is, what does it look like. So if you don't think you're a good fit, like that's fine. Don't even come to the event, right? Like we wanted to get that out as soon as we possibly can, and essentially qualify people. So those emails, we already got them registered. The call to action in those was actually to apply or to schedule a virtual interview, right? Because if we're able to get them further down the pipeline ahead of the actual event, that's just a win for us, right? I mean, that's great. We'd still come to the event. We'll have a drink with you, but yeah. So a couple different CTAs there, but that's what it kind of looked like.
That's the downfalls when I've seen ABA providers, for example, not do this well. And I've made this mistake, to be clear, like plenty of times in my life with any type of marketing event or communication or campaign. It's either one, that I didn't have a call to action. I was just like, oh, this Ascend is cool. Like, so check us out. So one, I didn't have the call to action, or two, it was way too long. So, and I just wrote down, like, hearing what you said, these call to actions are like 2 words: get started, sign up, smash the like, apply now, right? Like, this is short. It's almost, I mean, is the term like you have to dumbify a message? Maybe it's not dumbify. You just have to make it simple so people understand what you're asking of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to like connect with them exactly where they are, right? The other thing we think about a lot in digital marketing is kind of like the sales funnel or the pipeline, right? And if somebody is up here at the top of the sales funnel and maybe they're thinking about becoming a behavior technician, right? They heard about it from a friend or they saw something in the news. They might not be ready for apply now, right? Like, I'm not ready. I don't know enough about this. And so that's we were trying to create this intermediary step that said, like, informal, casual environment. We're going to buy you a drink. We'll offer you dinner. Like, just come learn more, right? And that's a much lower kind of barrier to entry than like show up to an in-person interview or, like I said, fill out a formal application.
And I think if I understood correctly from earlier, you ended up hiring some like 10 people, which like is really powerful. So here's my question. It comes back to like return on investment, because that's one of the hardest things in marketing, right? Is like identifying your end outcome and then how much money are you spending to achieve that outcome. And it can be so, especially some like quote unquote brand building activities can be so amorphous. Yeah. It's hard to like quote the ROI. But if you think about sort of the time that you spent, the dollars that went into this hiring happy hour versus the opportunity cost, right? Like if you were to do another type of campaign on Indeed or wherever to attract staff, how did you think about how this did ROI wise versus other types of recruiting efforts?
It's a great question. And so a couple of answers to that. One, we got 11 people scheduled, not hired, but scheduled for our shadow session, which is kind of the final in clinic. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those actually move on to become full-time team members. Two, I built this dashboard in conjunction with our hiring manager to look at all of the spend that he's doing today from an ad perspective on Indeed, on Glassdoor, on some of those like online platforms. And I was actually surprised to see that the cost per hire, it's pretty high, right? And that's not even like, we haven't even put them in training or certification. So based on the calculation I did this morning from last night's event, this was about 3/4 of the cost of hiring somebody through those kind of more call them conventional channels. That doesn't take into account the time of our team, but this is additive to what we're already doing. So I consider the time and salaries, if you will, kind of just sunk costs. Like, we weren't concerned about that, but yeah, from an ad perspective, it worked out. Like, we got more people. We did it quicker than a lot of our other channels. And again, it's like 3/4 the cost of kind of hiring one person from offline.
Well, yeah, I love it. And one of the things you've always helped me understand is this idea of like evergreen assets, like things that once you do them and you put them on your website or elsewhere, you've built those, you have them forever. And it sounds like that nurture campaign that you did in the lead up. I mean, you're going to have that forever for any candidate, right? Who might apply. So there's probably a lot of ABA providers listening saying, I'm going to do a hiring event like tomorrow. Any brief words of wisdom about, like, is that a good idea for someone? And if so, like, what do you got to do to get it right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what made we also did an analysis through the registration process of how people heard about us. And 95% of the people who registered for this event heard about us from Facebook and Instagram ads. So I would say if you're going to put the event up, make sure you promote it effectively. We made a flyer. We sent it out to some universities. That got us some traction. There were some people who registered that way, but I think that's one. Two, go ahead and assume that 50% of your registrants aren't going to show up, and then staff accordingly, right? We had like 20 people from our company who came and volunteered last night, and it was really fun because we all just got to hang out. But at the end of the day, like, we didn't need that many people, right? Because we should have just assumed that 50% wouldn't show up. I think those are the two things I would do. And three, just pick a cool location, right? It's one thing to be like, come to our office, but you can do something that really makes you stand out. And that's where, we picked one of the kind of cooler places in town. We did it at night, so we knew people would be not at work, hopefully. And just try to like make it really approachable.
You know what surprised me most about what you just described is that, this was a behavior technician focused event, and that it was the Instagram, and Facebook that actually attracted them. I've had a Facebook account for 15 years, and I haven't used it for the last 7 or 8. But I thought like Facebook's for grandparents, whereas it sounds like people still are using Facebook and things like Instagram as opposed to like the newer fangled stuff, and that was effective for y'all.
It was, absolutely. Facebook back in March of this year, this is pretty technical, but they took away a lot of the targeting parameters that we were previously using to get in front of really the right people who would be, most applicable or most likely to use our services. And so there was some learning for me in just like, how do we I just want to get this in front of like young people who are looking for a career path, who are empathetic, and like they're outgoing, they're good at time management. And so like pairing up those like kind of nebulous or ambiguous characteristics to like specific targeting, keywords and things like that was a little challenging, but there's ways to do it.
Dude, I'm worried now because I think I still have like Burning Man pictures from 2009. I think I untagged myself from those. That was an extraordinary adventure that Kim and my wife and I went on. That was fun. ABA practice owners, are billing and insurance issues getting you down? Well, let me tell you, Element RCM is your answer. Element provides world-class revenue cycle management services, contracting, credentialing, authorizations, billing, and more. Element's your partner, so you can focus on what you love to do, providing the highest quality services to your families and clients. Element's a preferred partner of the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, and its founders have nearly 20 years of experience owning and operating successful ABA organizations. They understand you. They know that every dollar counts, that integrity is everything. Element works with any practice management system. And Element's not a vendor, they're your partner. So find out more and take a free revenue cycle assessment at elementrcm.ai. Oh, well, Andy, what's like one thing that every ABA business owner should like start doing and one thing they should stop doing when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. If there were one thing I would say start doing, it's talk to your customers. Like, and again, that sounds kind of like, well, yeah, duh. And if you're own one clinic, like you might interact with your families every day, and maybe that feedback isn't as applicable. But every week I call at least one family that we serve. Every single week, I have a list. I build it out every month, and I ask them the same questions. But I want to know, like, how's it going? What's going well? What can we do better? What resources can we develop that would make your life easier? And every single week I find like it's just this amazing insight that I couldn't get anywhere else. And I'm not in the clinic, so it's a little bit different for me than it would be like our therapist. But I would just say you really need to understand your customers' needs. You need to walk in their shoes, and that if you do that, you will have a crystal clear path forward in terms of what you need to develop or communicate or improve as a business. So start doing that. If you're not doing it today, from the CEO all the way down, talk to your people you serve. In terms of stopping, marketing, it touches everything. It's just like, it's really interesting how, right, marketing can support hiring, it can support operations, it can support customer experience, but also branding and lead gen and all these things. And it can be really, really easy, even for me, to get lost in the weeds and to do too many things. Like, you're just stretch yourself too thin. So stop doing that. I would say do some testing if you're not doing marketing at all today. Figure out what works and like just hone in on those 1 to 3 things and continue doing them, continue optimizing them, and don't lose sight of that. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Right on. It's brilliant, dude, and so simple. Just fucking talk to your customers. How many times, especially in our field, do we make assumptions on behalf of our customers about what our clients and what they want or need, or and it's just, yeah, it frustrates me to no end. But let me ask, Andy. So, there are a lot of organizations that maybe don't have a full-time marketing person or a marketing department. So the first question I want to ask is, let's say someone's like, all right, I'm so inspired by Andy. I want to go and I'm going to get some Gram and Facebook ads. And I'm going to get one of these like people who reached out to me on, a marketer on LinkedIn who claims they can get a whole bunch of leads for me. How would you encourage an ABA provider to like evaluate an external marketing sort of lead generation agency?
Yeah. It's such a unique question for this industry because for many, if not most organizations in the ABA space, the problem isn't demand, right? It's like
Mm.
the problem is we don't have enough candidates, right? Or we don't, yeah, whatever the case might be. And so I think my first recommendation would be, if you're not already talking to other operators through CASP or through any type of industry association, one, do that, and two, as a result of that, get crystal clear on what you're trying to achieve. Like,
Mm.
is it just that, is it that you need more families? Like, you don't actually have enough people to provide services to, or is it that we need more candidates and we need to tell a very clear story about what differentiates us as a business and figure out those goals, then go out and if you don't have the resources to bring a full-time person in-house, that's okay. You can do a lot for a pretty reasonable cost with outside resources, but vet everybody you talk to against those goals. And I would even encourage people, like, socialize that with other operators in your network, right? Like, make sure that it makes sense what they're recommending. And then again, run towards 1 to 3 like key things. Even social media, it seems so simple, right? Like, we're going to start a Facebook page and an Instagram account and we're going to post pictures, but like, what are you trying to communicate and who are you communicating it to? Is it families? Is it candidates? Is it payers? And then all of a sudden you have to come up with content for that. You need pictures, you need a story.
Mm.
Is that story going to link out to something on your website? So it's really easy. Again, you pick one thing and you can get lost in all these different rabbit holes. So I just encourage people, get crystal clear on what your goals are, vet an agency or an individual against those goals, make sure that what they're saying makes sense and resonates and that they've got proof to back up what they're saying, that they know what they're doing,
Mm.
and then just stay really focused on that. Don't get distracted by the noise.
Nice. So, all right. So pick your goal or goals, figure out who your audience is, what your call to action is, and what the simplest, most elegant content is to get an agency to that call to action. I love it, man. Well, Andy, you've
Yeah.
had so many successes in marketing, but I want to know, like, what's something you failed at, dude, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah. Having worn all the hats and having worked at a lot of startups or just small, young organizations, I've had a ton of failures, man. And, those are the scars you wear on your back to be successful in the future. I think there's maybe 2 things. One is a little more, maybe call it philosophical than technical, but that's building strong relationships and understanding my customers day one. And we've talked about that a little bit here, so I won't beat the horse anymore, but like, make sure you just understand who you're talking to and build your message around that. And there are several organizations where I came in and I wanted to have an impact and I just started running hard and fast against what I thought was right and totally missed the mark, right? In terms of like
Mm.
marketing campaigns, in terms of messaging. So always start with that in mind. I would say the second just failure I've had, I've seen two different tech implementations go really poorly under my at least partial leadership at this point in time. So if you are in a place where you're thinking about bringing on a CRM or a marketing automation platform, or even right, we're going to change from whatever product you're on today to Central Reach, like slow roll it, right? Like take the time to really understand the full scope of what you're looking at. And I would encourage people, if you have the resources, like hire a professional to help you with that. Somebody who's got experience, who's gone through that before. With today's products and technology, like it's really easy to think you've got a full grasp on it and to miss the mark on, things that aren't in your day-to-day wheelhouse. So yeah, I've learned a lot from those two things.
I thank you for your vulnerability. And I mean, I'll say if you've only like failed at 2 tech implementations, then you're doing well, because there's probably dozens under my belt that I've screwed the pooch on. Early on at Ascend, we brought, I'm talking like early 2018, we brought Salesforce on board as a CRM. And the biggest thing we were excited to do was like marketing automation and build out the customer journey. And we had like this whole vision for it and like requirements. And we got going with Salesforce, and we're like, I mean, within a week, we're like, we've shit the bed. This is going to take, this would be a multi-million-dollar investment to like accomplish our vision. So we had to like so significantly scale back what we were hoping to do. That's a whole nother podcast topic to like dive deep.
Yeah.
But this stuff is really hard, right? Even when it feels like we've been able to pinpoint our goals and what we want to do. Like tech implementation is in support of marketing requires deep technical and other expertise.
And just change management. So I have a CRM admin who works underneath me, and we've got a really great partnership. And just yesterday, she and I had concepted, she came from our care coordination team. So she understands, like, she has a very deep understanding of our business and the complexities. We do ABA and physical health, speech OTPT. So like, there's just a lot there. And we came up with this solution to automate a bunch of what our records manager has to do, that's really complicated. And we were like, this is going to make her life so much easier, and it's going to take stress off her. And we had a meeting with her for an hour yesterday to like just walk through this whole workflow we built out, and discovered that like there were so many things we didn't know, right? And it was just like, we should have started the conversation with her to understand that from the get-go. So even that's just like not changing technology. It was just one process. But even that one process, it was like, okay, we need to take a step back. We got to get back to the drawing board. And yeah, just having those conversations is, it's really important.
Yeah. Oh, so important, man. Well, you've now brought as you've been talking about the hiring happy hour, your marketing skill sets and leadership you brought to the Shandy Clinic, in Colorado Springs, in Colorado. And there's like 6,000 to 7,000 ABA providers in the United States, and that number still blows my mind. But like, how is Shandy Clinic different, Andy?
Yeah, I think there's two key things that make us different. One is that we're a multidisciplinary provider. So we're center-based. We have 10 locations across Colorado. And we provide, as I mentioned, the ABA in addition to speech, OT, PT, and also autism evaluations. We have 3 clinical psychologists on staff. And so that, like, there's not that many people who are taking that care approach. It's a complex business. ABA in and of itself is complex, but that makes accessing services for families so convenient, right? Kiddo can come in the morning and do ABA, and then have lunch, and then get their speech OGPT in the afternoon. And time again, families they rave about how convenient that is. I think the second is just culture. So this organization's been around since 2007. I've only been here a couple months, but this feels so cheesy to say this, but it feels like a family. And a lot of the people who work here have been here more than 10 years, which is pretty crazy. And I think, having started with one clinic, started by a family, to growing where we are today, we've been really focused on just retention and culture, and making sure that people are supported in their professional growth. And everybody talks about it, but we kind of walk the walk there. And I just think that makes us stand out too.
Mm. How are you measured in your role?
Yeah, so in the first 30 days, I kind of did a full analysis of where we were from a marketing standpoint. We hadn't really had an individual like me in the organization before. And based on that analysis, we put together three OKRs, objectives and key
Mhm.
results. And so I'm measured around demand, I'm measured around recruiting support, and I'm measured around there's a revenue optimization metric around time to service as well. So yeah, I'm kind of marketing, operations, and recruiting, supporting all of those different teams.
So clearly wearing many hats as a leader, not just a marketing leader, but a leader in the organization. What it calls to mind, Andy. So let's say someone does hire a marketing coordinator, marketing director. Like, what are some of the what are like three metrics you would encourage any organization to use to measure their marketing person?
hmm Well, again, I think it depends on your goals. So if you are in a place where you need more families, right? You need more kiddos to serve for whatever reason that might be. Um, that's a really easy metric. It's really easy to set up a tracking mechanism that tells
Mm.
you where did somebody come from, right? Even if you don't have a CRM, it's just asking the question. I think that's one. Two, if really your needs are more around recruiting, again, it's association with recruiting, right? Like, how are you tying that marketing person's efforts back to candidates that are in the pipeline? Um, Really, I would say it's those two. You could look,
Yeah.
if you're doing email marketing, there's a whole bunch of metrics you can look at and compare to industry standards around open rate and click through rate. If you're doing lead gen campaigns, you can look at your cost per acquisition and how does that compare to dollars that were or weren't spent previously. But at the end of the day, for me, it's like, are we making sure that families are finding us and
Mm.
choosing us above all else? And are we doing the same thing for candidates?
Yeah. It comes back to what are our goals, right? Pinpoint those goals, and just that's half of life. I feel like, Andy, is just like figure out what game are you playing, right? Before you get on the field, like, what game are you playing? And that's yes, absolutely. So throw a question at me, like anything, and make me answer on the spot.
Yeah. Well, I told you the story about my sister. You've probably seen the new CDC rates. 1 in 44 kids is getting diagnosed with autism. The industry's exploding. But why aren't we doing more to serve adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities? That would be my question.
That is like a Hydra multi-headed, really challenging. So here's a couple things. I think so. We are still super new, not as a science, but as a field that is funded through insurance. I mean, that's literally within the last 10, 12 years, insurance, and we're still only now seeing states like Texas, right? Medicaid programs kick in, and many of
Yeah.
those programs had age caps. Now, a lot of them, they're slowly but surely, I think they're expanding into older populations. So that's one. So the explosion in ABA as a the gold standard of treatment for kids with autism came along with funding. I think the same thing will have to happen with
Mhm.
adults. We'll have to get rid of those caps.
Yeah.
The second thing I'd say is, it is we talk as a field all the time about caseload sizes, right? And depending on what you look at, that and intensity of services, that's anywhere from, it could be 7, 8, 9 kiddos. It could be up to 20, 25 kiddos.
Mhm.
Just the unit economics of how to deliver services um, mean that to have a caseload of adults and be able to not lose money, I mean, it would have to be I would think, dozens and dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, right? Because most adult services are
Mhm.
not like EIBI, 40 hours a week.
Right.
You're talking, they need an hour, couple hours a week, or every other week, or once a month, just working on a totally different set of skills. Now there are exceptions, right? There's a whole like distribution curve of what adult needs are. So not to generalize, but I think that's a hard thing. I think the other hard thing is just we don't have like I don't know. There isn't. I mean, the supply demand imbalance that we already see for serving
Yeah.
kiddos, like that gets exacerbated that much more thinking about serving adults. But the most important thing to me is like just where's the like intestinal fortitude that we're going to get out and
Hmm.
help
Hmm.
adults. And I think the biggest, I mean, there are a lot of challenges with not providing services, but you've seen the stats out there about how many adults are with autism are underemployed and yet have
Hmm.
extraordinary skills that could make them gainfully employed tomorrow. And I'm really
Yep.
excited and only just started getting into in the last couple of years, like learning about different organizations that do this really well, that teach job skills, that teach employers, right? Let's reshape the environment,
Yeah.
teach employers how to,
Yeah.
interview the right way and look past, some things that might otherwise,
Yeah.
show up as a quote unquote red flag in an interview. So anyway, so that I think that's a huge untapped need that that we
Hmm.
just got to find that intestinal fortitude to get after.
Yeah, love it. Thanks for the response. I agree completely. Thinking about my sister, she has access to part-time employment through the organization that manages her housing, her group home, and so fortunately she's in a pretty good place. But I just think about this huge swath of people, right, that are growing up, right, and hopefully they're better prepared to move into the workforce and to move into the world as adults because of things like effective ABA and the research and evidence-based practices that are happening today. But we got a lot of work to do. I mean, even just basic things like housing. Most people are not going to have access to that based on where we are today. So, yeah, it's a unique challenge, and it's something I'm paying close attention to as well.
That's exactly right. And we have to keep, I have to keep reminding myself, but like as communities, we have to remind ourselves, this is not about the adult with autism. This is about reshaping us and our behaviors, right? If we're going
Yeah,
to make for a more autism ready world,
absolutely.
that has to start with us. So that's also this broader, I think, societal change that you and I, Andy, I know are passionate about. And like, let's enlist everyone else to come and help us. So, Andy, tell me, where can people find you and Shandy Clinic online?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Just search Andy Mullins, should come up. For Shandy Clinic, shandyclinic.com is the website. And then we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, all those different things. Just search Shandy Clinic, SHANDY Clinic.
Nice. All right. Well, you ready for the hot take questions, man?
Absolutely. Throw them at me.
All right. All right. Here we go. Buckle up. So you're on your deathbed. What's one thing you want to be remembered for?
Empathy. Empathy and building community. 100%.
Mm. Oh, dude, that resonates. What's your most important self-care practice, Andy?
Exercise. Not something I really picked up until I was an adult, but I need it. I crave it. I
Mm.
love getting outside.
Well, and we haven't even talked about. I mean, I don't know how many mountain bike rides you and I have been on, but listeners, let me tell you, if you want to see someone go like like emergency room breakneck speed fast down hills, that is Andy. It is fun. I can never keep up with you. That part of the exercise that we are fortunate to do in Colorado is is pretty amazing. Well,
Amazing. Absolutely.
if you could cancel all your meetings for a day, how would you spend the day?
If it was summer, it'd be on a bike, and if it was winter, it'd be on a pair of skis. 100%.
Ah, nice. Now I'm getting. You know what? Okay, I'm gonna come back to this. This is an inelegant analogy, but tell me if this resonates. Mountain biking, skiing, like not only does it put me in my flow state, it feels like a drug. So I mean, I've never been addicted to like a heroin or any kind of drug, but like when it's something that like that's all I can think about when I'm not doing it, and I need to get back to it, and it's just like all consuming, and I don't know. I would think that's what a true addiction feels like.
It's absolutely a correct analogy. I don't always get it on skis, but mountain biking in general, but especially mountain biking. Like I get in the saddle and I start pedaling, and I immediately feel better. Like it's like I get that endorphin rush, and I get it every time I ride, and it just oh man, I love it. It's
Oh,
amazing.
right on. What's the best song ever?
It changes for me probably month to month, but right now it's Away from the Mire by Billy Strings. I'm just an absolute diehard Billy Strings fan. He's a phenomenal folk guitar player, and Away from the Mire, give it a listen. It's amazing.
Away from the Mire. I'm in. I'm going to smash it on my Spotify. If you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Focus. It would be focus. I feel like when I was 18, I had no clue, and I was going 100 different directions all the time, and the world was my oyster. And if I could go back in time, I would have. There's a couple things I think I really would have zeroed in on. So for any of you 18-year-olds out there that are listening to the Building Better Business and ABA podcast, get focused.
Get focused. Last question, Andy. You can only wear one style of footwear for the rest of your life. What would it be?
Birkenstocks. Easy one. Birkenstocks. All about the Jesus Cruisers.
Wow. So the 90s, I guess, have literally like come back into fashion. Is this true, man?
And maybe it's a Colorado thing, man. They are everywhere here. I picked up on this like 10 years ago. I tried a pair on and I was like, wow, these are comfortable. This is awesome. And then I've never looked back.
Birks are like the definition of function over fashion. But hey, listen, man, it was so much fun to catch up, Andy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I'm available if anybody has, questions or wants to chat. And I just really appreciate you, Jonathan, and what you're doing for the broader community of autism providers. So thank you.
Right on, brother. All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. We value your feedback. Don't forget to follow us on social media at elementrcm.ai.